The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this episode are that of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the values of sponsors or other associated organizations. Welcome to the Parental Compass by Family Education and Support Services. I am your host, Bobby Williams. Subscribe to the show. We drop a new episode every month. We want you to hear it. Subscribe to the show, please. Today we're talking about hope. Not just the hope of I hope I win the lottery, like a dream or something. We're talking about hope, meaning the belief that you can create a positive future for yourself, that your actions can get you there. That's something every parent wants their child to believe and to practice. So, how do we cultivate this in children? Here to speak with us about the issue is Jon Tunheim. Jon is the prosecuting attorney for Thurston County in Washington State. Through Jon's job, he's worked with a lot of children who have experienced trauma. This led him to research hope theory, and he really has a lot to share about it. Let's check it out.
Because, hope really for human beings, it starts in our imagination, right? When we think about the future, when we think about a future that we desire, the first place we do that is in our imagination. We kind of let our imagination wander. And so for instance, when kids are daydreaming, we'll catch kids daydreaming and we talk about it as daydreaming. But oftentimes what they're doing is they're engaging their imagination to think about the future, a future that they desire. And so they're kind of starting to build that skill. And so that's where hope starts, is in our imagination. And once we, have this idea of what our future looks like in our imagination, the cool thing that happens is our brain actually creates memories of that. So we create memories of what we want the future to look like. And we call that creating future memories.
Do you think cultivating imagination also cultivates hope? Like they seem pretty intertwined.
Snyder would say, yes, that's absolutely right. When kids start to use their imagination and engage their imagination to think about the future, that's a kind of a basic hope skill, because you can't really set goals for yourself if you can't, use your imagination to see what that could look like in the future when you achieve those goals.
So this show is about giving parents, real advice that they can use in their lives. So let's break it down to some ABCs, like what are things parents can do to cultivate more hope in their children?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is to be just very aware of when their child is thinking about and talking about the future, right? Because hope is always about the future, and it's always about trying to achieve a positive outcome. So when children are very small, even pre-verbal, when parents start noticing a child using strategies to get a toy, or maybe interacting with a toy in such a way that they do something and then something good happens, they get a reward from that. That's kind of building their basic hope skills, because they're learning if they do this and they do this and they do this, something good happens, right? And that we call that pathway thinking. They can actually see and create in their mind a pathway for how to get from where they are now to something that they want, right? And the other thing is that parents need to do is to kind of really celebrate a child's achievement and give them that sense of satisfaction that they did this, right? That they accomplished their goal. The scientific word that we use for that comes out of the hope literature is agency. We want to build their sense of agency, that they actually believe that if they do things, if they take actions, they can accomplish the goals that they desire. Now, that's as kids get older, they'll start with very simple goals, obviously, when they're very young, right? And as they get older, their goals get more robust and more complex, right? And so then it becomes really important to engage with kids and give them space to talk about their goals, right? To get clarity on their goals, to kind of pinpoint what those goals are, to make sure those goals are actually, desired and by the child. That's actually what they want, and that it's something they can actually achieve, right? Because you don't want to set the child up for failure to support them in a goal that they'll never actually be able to achieve. So supporting that and then helping them find that pathway, helping them develop that strategy, if you will, to accomplish that goal. And that those are building those basic hope skills of setting a goal, creating a pathway to achieve that goal, and then giving them that sense of agency that if they apply willpower and energy towards it, they can actually get there.
So what I'm hearing you say almost is like you can practice in small ways this hope development of like, here's a small goal, work towards this, you did it. And then they kind of learn how to do that in their brain, and that translates to the future. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then what'll naturally will start to happen is as that child starts to, accomplish smaller goals, they'll actually naturally start setting bigger goals over time, right? They'll start to see them, they'll feel that empowerment of that agency to want to set goals. And Snyder says it's actually a good thing for parents when they're working with their kids to, as they're setting goals, to encourage them to set what we call stretch goals. And that is make the next goal a little bit bigger and a little bit more maybe complicated than the previous goal in small steps. So they slowly build that sense of agency over time that they can eventually turn into big goals.
I've worked with a lot of kids who've been through trauma or they're very depressed. And a lot of what that does is it has them very much in the here and now. So, how do you help a child who's been through trauma start to think more about the future? Are there ways to build that up?
One thing that happens to kids who experience trauma is they can experience what is referred to in the psychology community as rumination, right? They start to ruminate on that trauma, and they kind of compulsively are remembering and thinking about the trauma, which drags their attention to the past. And that's actually goes against them in terms of building hope. And there's actually research out there that shows that that's one of the impacts of trauma is it can actually reduce a person's hope in a measurable way. And so the idea, I think, Snyder would basically say, you got to re-engage that child back into the future, right? And try to kind of provoke their imagination to think about something that they might want. But I think he would say very clearly, you can't do that too big too fast, right? You got to start small again with small goals, and let them accomplish something that's a small goal. So maybe something, for today or tomorrow or something like that. Or maybe it's just a short-lived project that's fairly easy for them to obtain. But then when they do achieve that goal, right, really celebrate it, recognize them, and make sure they understand and recognize that they did it, right? That gives them that sense of agency. And then again, a next goal, maybe not a little bit bigger, but not too much bigger than the previous one, and then the next one and the next one, and to just go through that hope building process. But you really have to kind of, if there's a child that has experienced trauma that's really ruminating back to those events and is struggling to think about the future, I think that the hope theorists would say, start small, start with some small goals, get them accustomed to and feeling good about the fact that they can achieve something that they want, and then continuously build from there.
I could hear someone listening to this and being like, oh, the ideas sound a little abstract. Like, what's an actual specific example of a small goal? Like, it could be any age of child. Just what's one way this could be played out?
let's say, for example, the goal is that they want to purchase something, right? And that maybe there is already an existence, or maybe the parent wants to start for the first time, allowing the child to earn, say, an allowance, some money that they could use to purchase something that they want, which could be their goal, right? And so the parent then is going to sit down and talk to the child about what are the tasks that need to be done to get that allowance. And so there'll be, if they can lay out clearly, here's the things that you need to do to earn that allowance, that gives them a pathway. So in Hope Theory, we would say that's the pathway for them. Maybe a good practical example is this. So one of my sons, my youngest son, we would ask him routinely to be the person who mows the lawn, right? And so we'd say, could you mow the lawn? And of course, if you ask a child just to do a task without attaching any reward to it, they may or may not do it because they're not necessarily motivated. There's no reward for it. But if I would say, hey, son, if you mow the lawn, I'll pay you $20 for that, then they've got a goal, right? Because they can use that $20 to achieve something that they want, right? And so now they have a clear goal, the $20, and they have a pathway, which is to mow the lawn, right? And so they can see that, how to accomplish that, and they'll be motivated to achieve that. And that's, how we build hope.
In doing my research for this, I saw information about avoidant goals. Could you explain to me a little bit what avoidant goals are?
Yeah. Avoidance goals are goals that are set to avoid something bad happening, right? So, avoid getting in trouble. For a child, this might say, I'm going to do something because I want to avoid getting in trouble. I know that there might be a negative consequence to doing something. So I'm going to take action so that I don't get in trouble. The problem with avoid, and that's different than what we would call an approach goal, or I like to call them achievement goals, but to me they're the same, where the child or the person is actually achieving something or accomplishing something positive for themselves. The difference there is that avoidance goals are always set around maintaining the status quo. They don't actually get something positive for the child. So they can be highly motivating, but usually for a very short period of time. Because there's really nothing that the child or the person gains with that goal. They're just keeping the status quo. Whereas an achievement goal or an approach goal, they have something that they're going to achieve and something positive is going to happen. So that'll be more motivating over a longer period of time.
Something that comes up again and again in this show is just how you are the example as a parent. So if you're a parent that's hopeful, that's practicing hope, they see that. But what if you're not feeling so hopeful? What if you're just a depressed parent right now and that's part of life? Like, how can you cultivate a greater sense of hope within yourself?
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's a really important question. In positive psychology, and particularly hope theory, we call that modeling, right? So children actually really learn a lot about hope just by watching the adults in their lives, and particularly their parents. So they'll pick up on these hope skills, this setting goals and creating strategies or pathways and the motivation from watching their parents. So it becomes really important then for parents to model hope, which means we got to take care of our own hope, right? And it's a little bit like being on the airplane where the flight attendant tells you put your own mask on first and then help the person next to you. And but it's the same process. It means, kind of, it becomes a mental discipline or a skill, if you will, to to engage the imagination to think about the future and something that you want, right? And figure out what a goal is, whether it's short term or long term, and then be focused on, creating that pathway for that goal so that you got a goal and a plan, right? And something that's desirable, so you're motivated to achieve it. And so that's the more that we can stay focused into the future for ourselves, that we can have our own goals that we're working on in a very practical way, the child will watch us doing that. And they'll even watch us doing that kind of even if we're having a bad day and, we're not feeling so hopeful, but they can actually see us go through that process of finding that new goal or setting a new goal or something. And that's a form of modeling in and of itself.
Seems like the cousin to hope is willpower, and how can you cultivate a stronger willpower to get things done even when you don't feel like it?
That's right. In fact, Snyder's original word for agency was willpower. That was the word he first used to describe this idea that you've got to have motivation towards the goal. You've got to be willing to commit physical and psychological energy, right, to chase that and achieve that goal. He called it willpower, and then over the years, the literature kind of evolved that word to agency because it also takes on a little bit more than just dedicating energy, but it also kind of contains this idea of believing in ourselves and believing in our ability to achieve the goal that we've set for ourselves.
Are there any other ideas? I mean, we're just skimming the surface here, but is there
Mhm.
anything important that you think we're leaving out of this conversation about hope?
Well, I guess maybe I would just reinforce that hope, the kids really start to learn hope very, very early before they can talk. And one thing that Snyder really talks about in his book, a book called The Psychology of Hope, he's got an entire chapter that's kind of dedicated to helping or nurturing hope in kids. And one thing he talks about is that it's also really helpful for kids to have good verbal skills. So learn how to be able to really express themselves, express how they're feeling, express what they want, and not give them any kind of negative feedback on that because they're able to communicate then what their goals are and articulate their goals as well. And then also the ability to those other kind of basic skills like reading and so forth, where again, reading is such a strong provocation of the imagination, right? It really helps them develop imagination so they can start using that tool as a way to see the better future that ultimately they desire. And so if parents realize that, I mean, that starts very young and that kids build their hope skills throughout their whole life, but as they're growing up. And then the other thing I would add, maybe that we haven't talked about, is the remarkable research about how beneficial hope is once kids start to get into school, right? So hope predicts higher academic performance in school, higher grades, higher engagement, more self-control, more self-discipline around getting like homework done and things like that. When you go into post-secondary education, it is the single best predictor of success in college. To the extent that no like GPA, high school GPA and ACT tests and all those, they don't compare anywhere to hope in terms of predicting success in college. So hope is it's really this incredible tool that they can develop in their kids very young, and it's a tool that they will use their entire life.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, John, for taking the time today.
Happy to do it. Thank you very much for having me on.
Again, John, thank you for being here. If you want to learn more about the ideas that we discussed today, John recommends that you check out the books The Psychology of Hope by Rick Snyder and Making Hope Happen by Shane Lopez. Look them up, get a copy. This has been the Parental Compass by Family Education and Support Services. I'm Bobby Williams. We'll see you next episode. Peace.